Join UF Hall of Famer and 14-year NFL vet Shane Matthews every weekday as he brings you all you need to know about your Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions with some of the biggest names in sports. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Or watch us live at 8 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Good morning. Welcome to a Thursday edition of the program, Podup Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. It's Thursday, you know what that means. Brent Beaird, our college football analyst and Heisman Trophy voter, joins us. We'll round it off. So let's go to the Titan More Hotline now. We're joined by, as I said, our college football analyst on the Titan More Hotline, Brent Beaird. Good morning, Brent. How you doing?
Shane, doing well. Good to be on with you as always. The excitement is not only do we have hoops entering the postseason tournaments with the conference and the NCAA, but we've also got spring practice that has started at some SEC schools, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and on the verge of starting with several others next week.
Yeah, as you said, Auburn's been in practicing for a few days. Gators crank up, I think, the 4th. But everybody, by the time you and I talk next week, everybody will be rocking and rolling. Let's go around the league because, I mean, as you said, March Madness is getting cranked up, the conference tournaments next week, all that. But when it comes to spring football, there's some interesting storylines at pretty much all the schools. Let's kind of start with Alabama. They got a quarterback battle. I guess you could call it a battle. I don't see it a battle. I've never seen Ty Simpson throw a football or take a snap, but I got to think he's going to beat out Jalen Milroe.
The thing with Ty Simpson is he really is the future for Alabama. Hasn't played much. Probably should have played in the bowl game more than he did, but he didn't for one reason or another. Jalen Milroe got in, but he didn't do much. Made one pass, didn't even come close to being completed. And hopefully for Jalen Milroe's sake, he's improved his passing. Shane and I have discussed this for a while, that really the thing that Simpson allows them to do is to basically open up the playbook to the fullest compared to Milroe. It is pretty safe to say that Milroe is limited in what he can do as a passer. He's a good dual threat quarterback, and particularly if people remember when Bryce Young got hurt versus Arkansas, Jalen Milroe came in and in some ways may have even saved the season with the 70-plus yard touchdown run that really got Alabama off the snide in that game. So, Shane, I think both of us believe at some point Simpson will win the job. I think it's just a matter of when that's going to be and how obvious it is to the coaches.
Yeah, and like I said, I think Simpson, I don't know anything about him. I've seen some pictures, not even highlights, just some photos of him. He's probably just a drop back, maybe can run a little bit. I could see Jalen Milroe getting a couple of plays here and there just to keep the defense honest with some running.
Sure.
I think it will be Ty Simpson. Arkansas, what's going on with the Hogs?
Well, they have got new coordinators. Kendall Briles and Barry Odom have gone to new opportunities. Travis Williams and Dan Enos are back. Williams at coordinating the defense and Enos coordinating the offense. Now, Enos will have KJ Jefferson, which is a great asset to be able to work with. But to me, the problem with Arkansas last year wasn't it, Shane, was more the defense. They had a difficult schedule, but as the season went on, particularly because of injuries, they struggled. So I think that's going to be one of the real themes for the spring is going to be the transition for the new coordinators.
And on the Plains, Auburn has already cranked up practice. Robbie Ashford was the guy that was finished their season as the quarterback. I know they tried to get a couple of guys out of the portal. Didn't happen. Doesn't mean it won't happen after spring.
Mm-hmm.
But does it look like Robbie Ashford is going to be Hugh Freeze's quarterback?
Maybe. He'll certainly get the chance this spring. They've got, as you mentioned, they tried to get Grayson McCall, and they tried to get Spencer Sanders, who, by the way, ended up at Ole Miss. Now, Auburn really started out first of all the SEC schools, particularly when you've got a new coaching staff in Hugh Freeze. I know, interestingly, Brian Matthews, who writes for Rivals.com with Auburn, said there may be as many as 21 newcomers who will be competing for spring positions. And he said he's been covering Auburn for 22 years and does not recall a spring with so many starting positions up for grabs. Now, Jarquez Hunter will be the starting running back, but he's got a bit of a battle with Brian Batty, who transferred in. So Auburn A-Day game on April the 8th. Tigers up and running with a lot of questions.
The Gators have lost 3 coaches to the National Football League, which don't blame them one bit. I don't think people realize, I've talked about it numerous times on this program, that you're going to see more and more of that, guys getting out of college athletics. But what can you tell us about the Gators as they crank up spring ball?
Yeah, and they're going to be going next week. I think that's what's going to be interesting. Now, obviously, as Shane said, they've got to replace coaches. Their wide receivers coach, Kerry Colbert, left for the Broncos. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I've seen this as far as who might replace him. South Carolina's Justin Stepp has been mentioned. Jeff Scott, who used to be at South Florida. Dallas Baker, certainly a familiar name, a wide receiver coach with Baylor. People may be wondering kind of where he has been. I still say their best hire so far is Austin Armstrong, who was at Southern Miss, and he was at Alabama for basically a cup of coffee, and now he is with Florida. I know the guy's young. He's 29 years old, but what they did defensively at Southern Miss last year, and I know Southern Miss, I get that, but I won't go into all the numbers, but they were quite impressive what his defense was able to do. So a lot of shuffling with that. And to Shane's point, and I'll throw this in here real quick, Shane. You mentioned coaches going to the NFL. So for 17 Division I assistant coaches have left for the NFL. Arizona's hired 4 of them. Denver's hired 3, New England 2, and the Panthers 2. And Shane, would you attribute this to NIL and the recruiting calendar? That there are a lot of things for college football that need to be corrected because these coaches are going to where they've got. I don't know if the workload is less, Shane, but it's certainly less chaos.
Yeah, all you got to worry about is coaching football. You don't have to worry about recruiting year round, and not only recruiting year round, but recruiting players on your own team year round.
Yes.
And the NIL nonsense. So don't blame them one bit. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. They should be naming those coaches here, I would think, in the next few days. I would lean towards the receiver coach being Jeff Scott just because they have a relationship.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe Dallas Baker will get it. We'll see. The Dogs got Mike Bobo starting spring calling ball plays, but they have a QB battle. They have 3 5-star quarterbacks that will be battling out. People think it's going to be Carson Beck, which it probably will be. But you got to think at least one of these 3 guys ends up going to the transfer portal after spring ball.
Probably, yes. Now, obviously, Carson Beck's from Jacksonville, and to his credit, he had a chance to leave, but he has not. But you've got Brock Vandergriff and also Gunnar Stockton. And that really is going to be the big battle for the spring. Now, there are a bunch of others, and Mike Bobo has got to. Now, Bobo was an analyst. Now he's the coordinator, so he's been on the staff. He certainly knows his team with this too. So, but again, that's going to be one of the big questions, obviously, for Georgia, and for the first time in years now, not to have Stetson Bennett. That's going to be quite a transition, isn't it, Shane?
Yeah, it really is. And then in Kentucky, I'm sure Kentucky's going to get all the love they get, it seems like, every summer. And when they go to the SEC Media Days, Liam Cohen is coming back as the OC. They got Devin Leary, the QB from NC State. But I think Stoops has done a phenomenal job with this team, but I just don't see them being very good. And maybe I'm missing it.
Well, and the thing that's going to have to happen, they were terrible last year on the offensive line. They had a lot of injuries. They could not protect Will Levis. That was a problem the entire time. Now, Levy should be ready for the spring. I understand that he had a pectoral issue, and that is kind of held him back a little bit, but he should be ready to go. But the coaching switch back to Liam Cohen will really help them. He did a really good job for them a couple of years ago and going to the NFL. Now he is back with that too. So, to me, Shane, it's going to be, if they can fix the offensive line, I think they will be much better. Now, Chris Rodriguez, the running back, who we both like, is gone, obviously, to the NFL. But again, the key is going to be that offensive line, and can they protect Devin Leary?
LSU, they're the defending West champs that went to Atlanta. Have a lot of guys back from their team, but they have a star in Harold Perkins on the defensive side of the ball. They're talking about moving him around and putting him at the Mike linebacker, right?
Yeah, I'm curious with your when you put your coaching hat on, if you had him, what you do with him. They had him basically on the edge most of the time. Now, do you put him at middle linebacker or do something different with him, or outside linebacker? That's going to be fascinating. I think the other thing also with LSU is Aaron Anderson, the wide receiver transfer from Alabama. He had a knee injury at Alabama when he was a freshman. He is close to being 100%. I think that's going to be huge. By the way, Malik Neighbors had a misdemeanor gun charge that's been dropped. He was in New Orleans, I believe, around the Mardi Gras time, and all that's been straightened out legally. But again, the big thing with LSU is, and that's why you have spring, is to kind of move guys around a little bit and to see where they are going to be able to go. And that's a nice problem to have with Harold Perkins in it, Shane.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal football player. There's no question. What's real quick? Are you in the market to buy or sell your home? Doreen Weeby, a realtor with Caldwell Banker, M.M. Parrish, will provide you with fast, friendly, reliable service. Call her today at 352-562-1411 to help your dreams come true. Brent, what's going on in the Missouri Tigers?
They've started practice too, and I think the big thing for them is going to be, I think one is Kirby Moore comes in as the offensive coordinator. Now, Brady Cook had some, I think is recovering from some surgery. I think he's going to be fine. They've also got a guy named Sam Horn, who is a pitcher for the baseball team. So he'll be back and forth. Shane, you remember the name Jake Garcia at Miami? Well,
I do.
He's at Missouri now. So he has transferred away from Coral Gables to get to Missouri. So that's going to be interesting to see what Eli Drinkwith is able to do in the spring. with all these quarterbacks as they get ready for the fall at that point too. So I think that's going to be the big thing right now is kind of what happens with all the quarterbacks. I still think they need to fix the defense in some ways. They've got to find a dependable running back, or at least get some versatility there. But Missouri always a team we kind of keep your eye on.
The two Mississippi schools, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, are cranking up. Well, one under a new head coach, new system. The other one's got a ton of quarterbacks. They got to figure out who's going to play. What can you tell us coming out of the Magnolia State?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Will Rogers does with the running offense, or at least more of a running offense. Mike Leach, as we know in the air raid, used the running backs more as receivers than he did running backs. So this time it's going to be more that way. Will Rogers is going to be, he will be challenged, and this is probably a pretty good challenge for him. I think it's going to be more dependent upon him throwing the ball down the field vertically, which is something they really did not do with Mike Leach. Now, what Mike Leach did worked, frankly. And again, I think the big thing with Ole Miss is going to be what do they do with all these quarterbacks. Jackson Dart was a starter last year, but they're not sure that he can keep that job. Walker Howard comes over from LSU. Spencer Sanders, in kind of an odd move to some people, transferred, but yet he's going to get a real shot at it too. And frankly, is a good quarterback. Shane, I think this Mississippi State, the transition to the new offense and these Ole Miss quarterbacks make spring very interesting for those two schools.
Absolutely. The Gamecocks had a great year, and Shane Beamer's done a good job the last 2 years. I did read somewhere, though, he has like the same record Will Muschamp had through the same amount of games. They just done it in different ways. What can you tell us about the Gamecocks heading into spring?
Defense is going to be crucial for them. I mean, they were they've lost a lot of guys defensively, but they've got some guys who are promising. They are 113th in Division I in the percentage of returning defensive production. They've got all these stats now, Shane, that is just amazing. I'm sure you look at that every day, which gets old, but that's what you've got. They've got some guys like safety Nick Emenwari, who led South Carolina in tackles as a true freshman. Nicholas Harbor, he's a 5-star freshman who's coming in. They really like him. And again, I really think with Spencer Rattler coming back, now he can improve too, obviously, but they've got to get and to be more solid defensively. I think that's going to be one of the big things coming up for them with this spring too, to be able to deal with that. They're also trying to figure out at South Carolina who is going to be running back. Lavosie Carroll, DJ Braswell, Mario Anderson, really young guys who need to step up. Unfortunately, they lost Marshawn Lloyd, Christian Bill Smith, and Rashad Amos. So, at the same time, and the thing that's important for them is to get the defense going and continue the momentum that they got from the Shane Beamer's in his last 2 years.
The Vols, they have their $10-15 million quarterback from California enrolled. He'll be battling Joe Milton. I can't pronounce his last name. This is going to be interesting to me to see how this turns out. It
is. Nico Lamaliva is how you pronounce that. And the only reason I do it is I divide it between Lama and Leva, so that makes it a little easier for me. But Joe Milton, and I'm curious what your thoughts on him are. The Michigan transfer, certainly not as accurate as Hendon Hooker, Now they've got Rue McCoy that comes back. That's going to really help. They made some good moves in the portal. Keenan Pilley at linebacker, defensive tackle Omar Norman Lott comes over from Arizona State. Defensive tackle Maury Thomas is going to be, they think, very good. They start a little bit later on March the 20th, and their spring game is April the 15th. But that's going to be interesting in a chain to see how do they do in a situation with a new quarterback, and can they continue the momentum obviously they got from last year.
Hey, Chris Doring Mortgage. They do mortgage lending right, helping home buyers throughout Gainesville and North Central Florida. Call Chris Doring Mortgage today at 352-244-0840. All right. I think one of the more intriguing hires was Bobby Petrino by Jimbo Fisher at A&M. Let me tell you this. They're going to throw the football, and they're going to throw it well. I know they were awful last year, but they may have the three best wide receiving core, the best wide receiving core they can play. And if they can get Connor Wigman making the right reads, throwing the ball accurately.
Recording in progress.
The Aggies could do something offensively. I don't know anything about the rest of their team, but with Bobby Petrino calling plays, with those three receivers, I think they could be dangerous, Brent.
They could. There's no doubt about that. And what Shane's talking about is Anaya Smith comes back. Remember, he got hurt during the season, but he is one of the big play threats in the SEC. That's one of the best. Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad III, all those guys are back. And Shane, here's the reality for them is how do you cover all those guys? That's really what's going to be tough when you think about that too. So I think that's just going to be fascinating to see where that goes. They need to rebuild their secondary. That's going to be important. They got a Florida State transfer, Sam McCall. Tony Grimes also came from North Carolina. Tyreek Chappell, I think, is good. But that secondary is going to be very important to see where that goes also. So, and you got to figure out who's a running back going to be. Amari Daniels, Levon Moss, Ernest Crownover. So, and they do lose Devon Achane, who I thought was one of the best backs in the league, had over 1,000 yards. So, no doubt, Shane, that this A&M team, I mean, obviously we've said it every year, that they could be dangerous, and people probably get tired of hearing that. But eventually, you would think they're going to put this thing together under Jimbo and be a real threat.
Yeah, no question about it. Brent, time went way too fast. We got to turn this thing over to Seth Harp. We appreciate your time, and we will talk to you next week, my man.
Good. And Shane, we will discuss he was logging on any Atlantic Coast Conference.
We want to take this moment to thank our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law attorneys of the Florida Gators. Peaceland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Comfort Temp, comfort is our business, peace of mind is our promise.
Campus USA Credit Union.
QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Dave & Buster's, eat, drink, play, and watch. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Celebration Point Town Center, Chris Doring Mortgage, Silverback Concrete Co., Rue's Ogre State Farm Insurance, Doreen Wibby, Realtor Caldwell Banker, MM Parish. Our touchdown sponsors are Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteak, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Aver and Smith, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Cube Billiards and Sports Bar. If you're interested in promoting your business on the show, call Freddie at 352-284-3733. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Hi, Steve Spurrier here. You know, making a reservation at my restaurant is easier than a Saturday afternoon homecoming game against Vandy. You don't have to call or email. Just go to spurriers.com, Hit the reservation button, pick a date, a number of guests, and a time. It's so simple, I can do it. In fact, I just did. Maybe I'll see you tonight.
Seth Harp, Harp on Sports with you here. A second half of Podup with Matthews in the morning. Brent Beaird joining me as a call to the bullpen takes place. Brent's still in the game. I've just slided here a little bit later on in the program. A couple things that we're going to dive into when it comes to the second half of this show. One of the big things, of course, the talk of conference realignment once again. Florida State, Clemson, we hit on this the other day a little bit. Unhappy with their current deal in the ACC, what that means for them going forward, and also rumblings out west that Oregon, along with Washington, both willing to join the Big Ten for a reduced share. Think about that. Oregon and Washington, both willing to join the Big Ten for a reduced share. So we're going to talk about those things. I want to start off first, though, college football rules changes that look to have full support at this point with Brent. And I bring Brent in right now. I mean, they've kicked around as many as 3 or 4 different ideas or different thought processes when it comes to speeding up the game. Brent, the average college football game, 39 minutes longer than it was just 20 years ago. So I'll let you get started with this in terms of the structure, or at least the 3 or 4 things that they're talking about implementing coming up starting in August.
Yeah, good morning, Seth. Always good to be on with you, my friend. It basically what that we've got here in most of these proposals, and there were 4 of them, have got some a lot of support prohibiting consecutive timeouts. This is icing the kicker. Folks are glad to get rid of that. No one time down at the end of the first or third quarter. And also the clock runs after first downs, except side 2 minutes and a half. The one that is probably the most controversial would be the clock would run after an incomplete pass after you spot the ball. So that would take some adjustment if they go there. Now, to elaborate on what you said a minute ago about what the length of the game and how that's changed over the last couple of decades, not as much in the last few years that we have seen. 3 hours and 21 minutes was the average game last season. A little bit of an increase from the year before, when it was 3 hours and 18 minutes, and 5 minutes longer than 2018 at 3 hours and 16 minutes. So you haven't had that long a period of time. I really do wonder, Seth, if they don't look maybe at reducing halftime a little bit, although if you do that, do you take out some of the pageantry of the bands and typical halftime entertainment that deserve their spotlight also? And Seth, it's safe to say, but it does bear repeating, and we hear this a lot from fans, is, well, just get rid of the commercials. Well, Seth, you and I both know the commercials aren't going anywhere, are they?
Well, I said, okay, we'll get rid of the commercials. Congratulations, your tickets per game just went to $200 each.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where the money's got to come from. It's got to come from somewhere. That's why anytime, Brent, I see any advertisement on TV, it's like the Subway halftime show, or like the pregame for anything, or, you know, this call to the bullpen is brought to you by Johnsonville Brats. I was like, Do they have to sponsor everything? Either the money comes from you or it comes from corporate sponsors.
Right.
I'd rather have it come from corporate sponsors. Seth Harp, Brent Beaird with you here on Podup with Matthews in the morning. Both of us joining you courtesy of the Titan MRI hotline. You got a question for Brent or myself, you can fire it away, courtesy, of course, of Meldon Law. Facebook Live questions brought to you by Meldon Law, the only official law firm injury partner of the Florida Gators. It's interesting that you say halftime because, Brent, I believe the college football halftime is 20 minutes. NFL is 16. So, I mean, you're talking about shaving minutes, but you're right. Then there goes the band, maybe to some extent.
Yeah.
So, but I know people love the bands, and Dan Bond says, don't mess with the bands. Brent, I can't think of the last game that I went to, and I am 44 now. I can't think of the last game that I went to that I watched the band. Now,
I understand.
listening to them at the end of the third downs and the playing and all of those things during the game, love it. But at halftime, I don't sit there and watch them. I don't go to the games for the band. So, I mean, shaving 5 minutes there may not be the worst thing in the world. So, okay, well, of all these, which one I like if you complete a pass on the first play of the game for 13 yards and the receiver goes out of bounds and there's 14 minutes and 46 seconds left, I don't feel that there's a need to stop the clock. What about you?
Well, I would agree with that. And look, and it's not so much that it's either right or wrong. It's just kind of what we're used to, and we're used to the clock stopping every time the ball is incomplete. And see that Seth, we're not in the wishbone era anymore. So you've got a situation where I mean, some of these teams, particularly Will Rogers at Mississippi State over the last few years. And look, I know the offense is changing, and we miss Mike Leach terribly. But the thing you've got, I'll use this for instance, is there were games where Will Rogers throws 60 passes, Seth. So the reality is, he doesn't complete all of them. So does that mean that the clock is stopped more than normal? Yeah, it probably is compared to a team that's more run-pass balanced. So I think that's a real something to keep in mind is and see that part of the rationale for this is we're running so many plays. There was a game last year, Seth, where a team ran 120 plays. I mean, that's amazing to think about that. Frankly, now I don't want everybody to go back to running 45 plays apiece, but the rationale, some of it behind it is if you run some fewer plays, it's the safety injury situation that may save some of this guys. I don't know if that's important to everybody. I mean, it is to me, but believe me, that's part of what's going on here.
And I think I have no problem with, like, if there's a defensive penalty to end the first or third quarter, carrying that over into the start of the second. Or I get why they want to do that. And how much are we talking there? Brent, how often do we see that? Maybe once a year per team. Maybe. So, okay, that's a small thing, but the first down stuff is definitely a big one. We think all these, with the exception maybe of the incomplete pass, all these are going to pass, aren't they?
Probably.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we probably will hear about this by the end of the week. Again, you've got committees involved and so forth, but I think that's going to happen. And again, think about this. We've talked about a lot of this would be people who are watching games on television. Well, how about people who go? I mean, Seth, look, here's the reality of it. If it's Gainesville, Tallahassee, Coral Gables, Athens, wherever, if you're going to a game, we in the media do this, fans do this too. I mean, you're basically dedicating the majority of your game in your day to be able to go to a game. So the reality of it is in the course of an 8-hour day devoted to going to a game, and I'm being facetious here, but yet I'm not. Seth, is 10 minutes going to make that much difference?
Yeah, that's why I always thought it was fascinating when people leave games that you sit there for 3.5 hours. It's a tie football game, and I see people heading for the aisles, or baseball games. We got to leave at the top of the ninth to beat the traffic. So you just drove 2 hours to a game, sat there for 4 hours, and you're trying to shave 20 minutes
Sure.
to do what? To go home and stare at the TV and watch another game? I agree with you. I it's one of those things I never really got, but hey. I know this is built for people on TV, because I always try to remind people too that 97% of football games, if not more, are watched by people on TV, not by people in the stands. Like the average Florida Gator game, 97% of that consumption is taking place on TV. I want to get to conference realignment, at least some talk on that coming up here. A couple of things. Podup with Matthews in the morning is a service of Peachland Dental, or Peachland Dentistry, excuse me. Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. So Peachland Dentistry. Okay, I'd hit on this on, I believe it was Tuesday's show, about Florida State and Clemson wanting a bigger cut of the share when it comes to the ACC. And I get it. I guess their approach is kind of looking at it like Texas looked at the Big 12, like, hey, man, we provide more of the majority of the revenue. We deserve a majority of the cut.
Sure.
Yeah, if the NFL operated like this, you could never have teams in Buffalo, Green Bay,
really,
Jacksonville. You could never, ever have that. So the revenue sharing in the NFL, which is socialism, it really, really is when you get down to it, with revenue sharing, it allows you to have 32 sustaining teams, right?
Right.
When it comes to this is it's not exactly like baseball where certain teams get more money, but it kind of is. I look at this as just a shakedown from the ACC for Clemson and Florida State, because if you're the ACC, you can't afford to lose them. So you just can't. So they want what, 5 or 6% more? I think if you're the ACC, you have to give it to them. Well, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I would agree with that, but there's something deeper here that is really going on, and reading between the lines, and also talking with some media and other folks at FSU. The reality of it is they really want to get out of the ACC and go to another conference. That's your bottom line for this, particularly your FSU's, Miami, Clemson, and also some others. But again, the problem here is there's an exit fee of $120 million, and we all know things can be negotiated. But this grant of rights that they signed, it goes through 2036. Now, the amazing thing here about the money is when you compare to these other conferences, and this is certainly on the verge of happening, and the money may be off a little bit, but you'll get the point, is the ACC schools getting about $42 million a year from the conference. Now, the SEC is soon going to be getting, this is mind-boggling here, $70 million a year, and the Big Ten around $80 million a year. These deals that are going to be happening, you've got the SEC and their new ESPN ABC deal is around $811 million a year. The Big Ten is $1.1 billion, and the ACC is far behind that. Seth, what really has to upset them is we know these new deals are about to go into place with the conferences along with the expanded playoffs. Mm-hmm. The amazing thing is the SEC and the Big Ten are actually going to renegotiate their deals yet another time and basically allow the ACC before they have a chance to renegotiate their situation in 2036. Now, you understand TV as much as anybody I know. These schools are looking at this grant of rights, and trying to really find some kind of loophole with this. But the understanding is because of the grant of rights, let's just say one of these schools like FSU went independent. Well, if they get an independent schedule, that money still has to go back to the ACC. So, and Seth, there are many layers to this, but it's very easy when you look at this money, merciful heavens, compared to the SEC and the Big Ten. The ACC is looking at this and saying we're being swallowed up here over the next few years.
Yeah, and I it's one of these things that if I've said if Florida State and Clemson, the place that the fit for them, I think, is the Big 12.
Yeah.
If and I always try to tell my Florida State friends this: if the SEC wanted you, they'd got you already.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want you. If they wanted you, they'd have gotten you already. And for the SEC, I think Miami's a bigger market. And, tradition wise, I understand it a little bit. But from the Florida State, it's more centrally located. I get it. But I think if I were the SEC, I'd rather have Miami. It's a top 10 media market, and I could all of a sudden plunge myself down into there for different sporting events. I can host all sorts of tournaments down there. You bet. I'd rather have my hands on Miami than Florida State and Clemson's. It's a good football program, but media market wise, I already got South Carolina and Columbia. I don't know why I would need Clemson. So I think I don't know where else they would go. The Big Ten doesn't want them. And speaking of the Big Ten, I saw this story last night, and I wanted to bring it to your attention as well. I want to bring it to everybody's attention. I know you already know it. Washington and Oregon. Now, this is where it starts to get tricky.
Yes.
Reports, Fox Sports, Fox has the report that after the Big Ten, because Kevin Warren, the current commissioner, left to be the president of the Chicago Bears. Once they figure out the new commissioner, that Oregon and Washington are willing to join the Big Ten at a reduced rate and payout. So they're willing to take less money because, ready for a 30% less cut, because that 30% less cut, Brett, is still $30 million more than they'll make in the Pac-12.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, that's staggering to think about that, isn't it, Seth?
Oh, gosh.
That they would do that. But still, look, your point's a good one because of how fragile the Pac-12 is at this point. Now, obviously, they want to add some other schools that aren't going to blow the typical college football fan away. But I mean, you're looking at the Dallas market, you're looking at the California market, but right now, and if Oregon and Washington leave, I mean, basically, Seth, the Pac-12 will be done.
Yeah.
At that point. I mean, they may be able to pick up a few schools. And remember, we're talking here about the new TV contract. Well, the Pac-12 still doesn't have that. They're still trying to get that done just so they can stay together. Now, we can criticize this grant of rights that we just talked about for the ACC through 2036, but to the folks who got that done, Seth, it kept them together, didn't it? Yeah. That's one reality that right now the Pac-12 has no assurance of that, do they?
No, and I look at it this way, and you're right, if the Pac-12 loses Washington and Oregon, they lose those, then they become the conference, Brett, of Boise State, UNLV,
yes.
San Diego State. That's what they become. They basically absorb some chunks of the Mountain West, and you're right. Then all of a sudden, then we have the Big Three, don't we? At that point, you'd have the Big 12,
no question,
the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big Ten, and then whatever's hovering over there, whatever's going on with the ACC, with Florida State and Clemson. So again, here we go, another go around, and the thing is now is who does the Big Ten want next? Because if their payouts are going to be $100 million a year, Brett, you can go get Miami, and
sure you can.
Think about this, and I try to explain this to people. Let's say it's a $120 million buyout for Miami, because that's the Big Ten, and I always try to tell people this because I grew up in the Midwest, and I have friends that work at some of these Big Ten schools that said their target has always been out of the ACC, Georgia Tech. because they want academics,
Yes.
sidebar,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
they want their hands on Atlanta. They want
Sure
the
they
state
do.
of Atlanta. The Big Ten chases media markets. I always try to tell people they didn't have Rutgers because of their great football history. They had Rutgers so they get their hands on New York. They didn't add Maryland for their great football history. They had Maryland so they get their paws on DC and Baltimore. They want media markets. Washington gives them Seattle. Oregon gives them Portland. So that's what
Yes.
it's had good programs, but also happen to be in big media markets. So there we go on that front. Quick reminder to everybody, Podup with Matthews in the morning, a service of QC Kinetics. If you've got joint pain in your knees, shoulders, hip, or back, it won't go away. Check out QC Kinetics for long-lasting relief, not surgery, drugs, or downtime. Schedule your free consultation at QC Kinetics, locations in Ocala, also open in Gainesville, 352-400-4550. That's 352-400-4550. Okay, so all these alignment talks. Brent, I've always been a big fan of this. Maybe you aren't. I don't know. I've always thought it's kind of one of those things about revenue, and it's going to be a sidebar, and you're not ready for this. So I'm throwing you a curveball. You ready?
Go ahead.
Love, because we're talking about like the Big Ten is about what, $12 million more a year than the SEC in terms of the payouts. That may not sound like a lot, but if each school is getting an extra $1 million, that's $1 million I can spend on recruiting that you can't. It's $1 million.
Sure.
I was thinking that the SEC should partner with Amazon or Google and give us SEC Monday Night Football.
Look, that frankly, I'll tell you how I feel about that. That's close to genius. Now, here's the reality of this. We mentioned the Pac-12 a minute ago.
Uh-huh.
Part of what the Pac-12 is going to be doing for their TV, and I think they're just kind of forced with this, but because they're limited in some areas. But here's the reality: the Pac-12 is interested. You hear more about streaming services with the Pac-12 than you actually do with the SEC or the Big Ten. Now, that doesn't mean SEC and the Big Ten's not going to do something with streaming, but we cannot ignore it. A lot of people may not like it, and it probably scares people to some degree because it's different. But Seth, you see this coming, I know, down the pike, and people may not think that this is going to be a big deal. It already is a big deal, and it's only going to get bigger because the streaming services are going to get more involved with these conferences, because these conferences want more ability, they want more revenue, and they want more revenue streams. Now, Seth, I would, to go on what you're saying, I don't think we've even scratched the surface yet of streaming. And look, if you had a situation like you're talking about, a Monday night SEC game that you can only get on streaming, I think people would be shocked how many people would pay to see that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Amazon Prime account for Thursday Night Football this year. And it's one of these things, too, where I want to do the math on this. And remember, the NFL is splitting it 32 ways, right? Because you have 32 teams for their TV contracts. It was over $1 billion. So, you start to do the math on this a little bit. Now, it's the NFL. There's more teams. I get it. So I'm just going to be nice and do half of that. So let's say it's $500 million for the SEC, a Monday night game. It doesn't, Auburn, Alabama, you're not going to put that on Monday night. But you can put Texas A&M and Arkansas on Monday night. You can put Florida and LSU on Monday night. You can put South Carolina and Tennessee on Monday night. There's certain games that you could put on Monday night that would be a draw. It'd be about $500 million per school. What do we got here? When it's all said and done, hold on. I thought I had this typed up and I didn't. That would be about an extra $31 million a year per school. Just it's an idea. It's an idea to bring in some more cash.
And which is more money in that one situation than some conferences are making year round. Now, here's another thing. Now, people are going to they're going to say, well, now we play on Thursday. Now we play on Friday. Or are we going to play on the rest of the week? Well, let me tell you what's coming with this. And again, this is just talk, but there's some speculation that when we actually expand the playoffs, that we may have a situation where we may have playoff games during the week.
Yeah.
Okay. That we're going to have now. Some people may not like this, but when the playoffs are expanded in college football, Seth, we're going to have to start thinking differently than what we were before, because all things are going to be on the table, are they not?
Yep.
And now to your point, do we not think, I don't care what night it is, that SEC fans wouldn't watch an SEC game, playoff or non-playoff game, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, almost as much as they would any other day?
I look at the SEC now and I can't believe I'm going to say this, it's almost too big to fail in terms of like consumption. It is. I mean, you could throw it on, and no matter what happens, no matter how bad the team is, it's still going to pull more. The average, a below average SEC team will still draw more interest than an above average ACC team. It's above average any conference. It is.
Yes.
And as a guy from Big Ten land, it's one of these hard truths. And that's why I always love bowl season, Brett, because I always love making bets with my buddies and taking their money that I grew up with, because they bet with their hearts and I bet with my brain. So it's like, well, there's no way Ole Miss is going to beat us. All right, well, let's go time for Seth to make some more money. I look at it this way, because Mississippi, even the schools that you would consider the bottom third of the SEC in terms of cachet, like Mississippi State or Ole Miss or Arkansas, still have more cachet than the middle of the pack teams in the SEC, or the Big Ten, like
sure,
Maryland or Minnesota. They just do. They have more cachet than those teams. And I mean, you could make a case that, Brett, the bottom four of the SEC probably would be 5, 6, 7, 8 the ACC. So you're right.
Oh yeah,
it just is. It's a conference that it's always going to draw eyeballs. It'd be like stacking up. Well, it'd be like stacking up the Packers and the Cowboys and the Giants. That's what it would be like in the NFL.
Oh yeah. And the thing is, you're going to watch those teams. Let's say you're a Gator fan. You're going to watch those teams because somehow or another they affect Florida, don't they? And you may have to drill a little deeper to do that, but it will. And Seth, here's another thing to keep in mind. If the SEC goes from 8 to 9, you've got more inventory that you're going to have to deal with. You've got additional games. People love that. And again, to your point, wouldn't they rather see Florida and Arkansas than they would Florida and the Sisters of the Poor?
I was trying to tell people, and it's going to be a weird reference, but professional wrestling was struggling mightily in the late 80s and early 90s because all they would do is record, house shows, and they'd play them back Saturday and Sunday night, and
sure,
it would be a no man against a Hulk Hogan or whatever. It's like, oh, nobody's going to watch that. Nobody wants to watch that. So then they developed Monday Night Raw and had real wrestlers fight real wrestlers every single night. And it's like, and all of a sudden it turned into $1 billion company. What do you know? People want to watch greatness. People like name brands. So what do you know? All right. Well, there we go. I mean, Brent, I know you pulled a whole hour today. Thanks. And I know as always, Shane and everybody appreciates it, and always good stuff talking with you, my friend, and look forward to doing it here again soon.
Absolutely. And Seth, keep in mind, next week, a lot of the SEC starts spring practice. So along with hoops, plenty to talk about coming up.
Yeah, it's hard to believe the SEC tournament. We didn't even get to talk about the Gator fight in women's basketball. Didn't even get to talk about. I'll do that tomorrow. Maybe I'll do it.
Yes.
Brett, as always, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Seth. Take care.
It's been Seth Harp, Brent Beaird, Podup with Matthews in the morning. Everybody enjoy your Thursday. Again, great time had by one and all, and we'll be back again tomorrow. This is for Seth Harp, Brent Beaird. Take care, everybody. Enjoy your Thursday.